So in this episode, I'm going to show how I film these underwater shots with this fish tank. So with COVID currently happening at the moment and everyone doing these, stay-at-home film challenges and trying all these different new techniques and different types of stuff, I thought I'd revisit something that I did earlier last year in 2019, and that was using a fish tank to film some underwater shots with different types of objects such as fruits, vegetables, and different types of products. And a lot of people actually requested me to make this video, so I'm going to quickly run through the list of things that I use to make these shots possible. So for this shoot, I'm going to be using red capsicums. They're a little bit old and they do have a little bit of wrinkles on them, but unfortunately that's all I have at the moment to work with today. The good thing is they're quite a vibrant color. They're very nice and red, so that's going to work really well with the backdrops that we use later on. So next is my GH5. So I like to shoot with anything that has at least 120 frames and above for the slow motion effect. And the reason for that is I just found that anything below 120 frames, the slow-mo doesn't quite give off the same effect. Getting that smooth, buttery slow motion at those really high frame rates allows for those effects to really kind of come through and jump through. You get to see all the bubbles and you get to see the water kind of warping around the fruit. With the GH5, it has the capability of going up to 180 frames per second, which is the setting that I'm going to be using, but we'll get to that very soon. Attached to that is also the Metabone Speed Booster and the Sigma 18-35mm lens. So I'm using the Yongnuo 360-2s, the RGB LED Wands, and these lights will be serving as these nice sort of kicker lights that will highlight underneath the tank as well as the side of the tank in conjunction with the diffused daylight that's coming from my window. Usually I'd have a aperture 120D set up with a diffuser to give me that sort of soft overall fill light, but because that's left at the studio and I currently can't get to it, I'm going to be using this window just in the back here. Right now it's a pretty good day, it's overcast, and we're going to get this constant soft diffused light coming through the window. So these sheets of paper are from Officeworks, so I try to choose something that was as vibrant as possible, different varieties of colors as well, because different types of fruits, different types of products will have different contrasting colors and effects. What I'm going to choose for the capsicum is actually the yellow one. I do like how the blue one makes the red really contrast and pop, but the way that the warmth of the yellow kind of goes with the theme of the capsicum's got this nice hot pepper chili kind of vibe to it, which I'm liking. So I'm going to use the yellow paper for this one in particular. So right now we've got the fish tank already filled up with water. I like to have it not all the way to the top because that is a bit excessive, but I do like to have it just about, I'd say about a third or a quarter away from the top. So with this fish tank, I chose a small one because I thought it would be a good convenient size for most different types of objects to fit into. The other factor is weight. So obviously the bigger the tank, the more water you have to fill it up with, which means the heavier it's going to be. Like this one here is only about 30 centimeters by 20 by 20. So another thing is I try to keep the fish tank as clean as possible. So before I even fill it up with any water, I try to give it a nice rinse and wash down and a wipe, just so that there's no dust or residues or anything else that's sitting inside the tank. Other things to notice around the set is I've got this funky colored blanket on top of the keyboard over there. That's just to stop any splashback getting into the keyboard and, ruining the electronics and stuff like that. That black one there is covering the bookshelf because, you don't want to get your books wet. On the floor, I have a spare towel just lying around just to stop any water from leaking down and getting into the carpet. And just before I forget, always try to have gaffer tape. It has a lot of different uses and you can grab these from pretty much any hardware store around. It's just really, really versatile and great to use for pretty much any set or any type of setup. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to get this colored piece of paper and I'm going to stick it to the back of this fish tank, just because when we shoot through the fish tank, there's going to be a bit of discoloration and a bit of the lessening of the contrast because, the deeper the water is, the less light that goes through it. So to keep the vibrancy of the paper, I'm going to try and keep it as close to the fish tank as possible by tracing it out, measuring it to the same size as the back of the fish tank and sticking it on with some gaffer tape. So with the lighting setup, I'll put the LED one just below the tank here and angle it upwards. And this is just to give some light that makes the background pop more, as well as exposing the capsicums in the water. Then we're going to switch on the other LED one just on the left here on the stand. The light that's coming from the bottom of the tank is actually giving this very, very nice highlight to the capsicums and giving them more shape. Just dunking the capsicum into the middle of the tank where I'm going to be throwing it in and just getting the focus on my camera and the lens. Going into the camera settings, we'll go into rec quality and put on full HD 8-bit 100 megabits at 50 frames. And once we got that sorted, we'll go back out into the menu, then we'll go into variable frame rate, and in there we'll tweak that to 180 frames. The next one is we're going to go into our menu and we're going to drop down to SS/gain operation. So inside there you see sec/ISO, then you got things like angle/ISO and sec/dB. So we're going to go to angle/ISO. With this one set on, we can actually tweak the shutter speed so that it will stick to the 180-degree rule. And the reason for that is we want it to be double the amount of frame rate so that we get that nice smooth motion blur. So I'm going to dial through that and make sure it's up to 180 degrees. If I'm shooting at 180 frames, then the shutter speed will be at 360 or 1/360th. With the aperture, we'll have it at 1.4. This lens is technically a 1.8, but with the speed booster, I can open up the aperture wider. So for this one, I'm going to go to 1.4 so I can get a bit more shallow depth of field. Next is the picture profile. So I like to set it to natural, especially when shooting at such high frame rates. It retains really nice naturalistic colors that is close to what I'm shooting. And also I don't have to touch it up too much in post. With the white balance, we're going to simply leave it at 5600 just to match the white balance coming off the Yongnuo as well as the daylight coming out from outside. Cool, so we'll do a whole bunch of different takes and see how we go. Right, cool. So now that we've got all of our shots and all of our takes, let's jump into Premiere Pro and see what they look like. See these dots here? You can see that the LED wand, the bulbs, are actually being reflected in the glass itself. So what I did was I just pointed it upwards a bit more so that I would hide the LED bulbs underneath it. And the other thing is, it actually opened up more room so that we can see the top of the water. This is why I really like shooting that surface of the water. Just seeing that break in the water and then the rest of the water rippling at the top, it just adds a nice perspective and dimension to it. So real quickly, when you look at this take, one thing that I can notice is this line here. So what happened during the shoot was, obviously after each splash, because the paper is right on the back of the fish tank, the water's going to splash, drip over the side, and then hit that paper. So what I did was I cut out a fresh new piece of paper, taped that to the back instead, and then I used that piece of paper. I thought, you know what, let's just make a little flappy makeshift shelter for it. So I used some gaffer tape, taped it over, and then I used some extra gaffer tape to stick it in between the seams and the gaps so that the water wouldn't seep through and then hit the paper again. You know, obviously I would like to use something that's more water resistant, more waterproof, because, you know, you can just wipe it down and keep doing as many takes as you want. But because, again, we're in lockdown, COVID, this is all I have access to at home at the moment. This is what I gotta work with. So that's my solution to stopping that from getting too wet. Shooting in that 50p video profile on the GH5 means it's in a 50 frames container. So even though we shot at 180 frames, technically what we're seeing now is the playback in 90 frames, which is half of 180. So if we right click this clip, go to properties, it says 50p. But just to explain that again, we shot this in 180 frames. We're only seeing the playback in 90 frames, but because this footage is in 50p, we can actually half speed this so that we can see it play back in 180 frames. Bit of maths, but that's okay. Let's right click this effects button here to time remapping speed, and you'll see the bar drop down. When you put your cursor over, it'll turn to this. We're gonna hold shift because what that does is when we pull that cursor up and down, it's gonna go in increments of 5%. So let's drop that down to 50% and it's gonna spread that clip double in length. Let's just save this real quickly. Let's play. Boom, look at that. That's smooth and milky. I really like that. That's cool. That's cool already. All right, we're done. No, I'm just kidding. And what I like to do is I like to go to effect controls, go to rotation and type in 180 degrees, and that's just gonna flip it completely upside down. Boom. And the reason why I like doing this to this type of shot is it just creates that very strange warped perception of reality. It almost makes it start looking like CGI. When you drop something in water, you see gravity affecting it, but flipping it upside down just kind of plays with that whole perception of things. So now that when we play that back, you see the capsicums go up and then back down. And I like that the capsicums actually float there on the water too. That just looks so interesting. So yeah, that's how I achieve the underwater fish tank shots. Thanks again to all the people who asked about how I achieved this, and I hope this was helpful to you. For any suggestions, questions, or even recommendations, if you guys have any other ideas or things that you want me to do or try, leave a comment down below. If you guys want to hit me up directly, I'll leave my Instagram links in the video itself, as well as putting the links in the description with the equipment that I used in this video. So again, I hope this video was really helpful. I hope this gives some insight into how this was done and what I do. And again, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you guys all next time. That's it.